Edward Brokens. I was born on a farm east of Scotch Grove, Iowa, 1920. My dad wanted to ship a load of hogs to Chicago to put them on the market, and my grandma says, no, we gotta keep them at least another couple of months to get some extra weight on them. What happened when they shipped them, my dad went with the hogs to Chicago. He didn't get enough for the carload of hogs to pay the freight. Before the Depression hit there in the fall, corn was around $2 a bushel. Corn went down to a nickel a bushel. That's why we moved to town. Us kids all found odd jobs that we could do. We run paper routes. We did everything imaginable. Well, when World War II came along, I was working at a factory in Cedar Rapids. 2 weeks after the war was declared, the factory closed because it could not get materials, couldn't produce anything for the war effort. So we were all out of work. Well, when my draft number came up, it came up here in Jones County, Iowa, and I'm in San Diego. So I asked them to transfer it out there, and I thought, well, what I better do is go and enlist in the Air Force, because I always wanted to fly airplanes. And I went down and I went through the physical and all the mental written test and everything, and I got accepted. I got in as an aviation cadet, that's what it was called. I got my wings in 1 year. My orders sent me to Kirtland Field in Albuquerque, New Mexico for B-24 training. I asked my instructor, I said, how come, you knew I wanted P-38s, how come you're putting me in these B-24s? He said, someday you'll thank me. Well, I figured as long as he assigned me to it, he figured I could fly it. I figured we would probably go to Europe. They pulled the top 10 crews and said we were going for special training on F-7s at Oklahoma City. We learned to fly the F-7 and learned everything about it. What that plane was a modified B-24. The back bomb bays were all camera and radar equipment, and it had a radar dome on the top of it, and it had cameras in the nose of it, and the front bomb bays were gas tanks. It was a snooper plane. It went out, it would go into areas and map areas that they were going to bombard and stuff, and try to see. The pictures would show a lot of times where things were hidden.
Okay.
So we'd go out and we'd photograph a whole area and bring it back, and then they put it all together and really study it and figure out what they had to do with that spot. We went in and they said, the plane is full of gas, you take off here and you circle the field until you get 9,000 feet of altitude. Then you open the orders, just follow the instructions. And we were to go down the east end till we found a big river coming out of New Guinea. They said, fly up the river, and when you start up the river, then call the tower and ask them for landing instructions. Now we watched and we seen a cut through it, so we said, we see the runway, okay, just go in and land. So we went in and landed. The whole camp came out there to see what an F-7 was. They'd never heard of one. That was the name of it. That was Nadzab, New Guinea. So we sat there about 2 or 3 weeks, and finally they called us in one day and they said we were to take the plane up to Kirtland Field, which was 50 miles north of Manila in the Philippines. We had a radar man on there that knew how to run the equipment that was on that plane. And we had a photographer on there that knew how to do the camera equipment. Because you could fly down a valley and use them nose cameras, or the waist cameras, and the cameras were mounted like here and here and here. Well, they all were synchronized. So when they went down there, they were continually snapping pictures, and it'd be horizon to horizon. Well, then we reported in for duty. They said, we don't need any more crews. We've got 30 of them sitting here. They'd shipped about 30 crews by boat over there or flew them over there, but no planes. They wanted the airplane. And one day my radio operator, he was an old-time Army man. He knew his way around, all of the tricks to pull and everything else. They come to me and they said, just cover for us today, we're going hunting. They come back that night and they said, there will be a weapons carrier or jeep here in the morning to pick you up. It was a B-24 unit. They had all kinds of planes, and they only had about 6 crews to fly them. I went down there, and the commanding officer of the 408th Squadron, and I had about a 2 or 3 hour visit, and he said, how many crews do you think you could round up that would like to go back to B-24s? I said, well, I won't make any promises, but I know there's a couple that'll go. Well, when I got done, I had about 6 of them. That gave us a chance to get 12 airplanes in the air for a mission. I think the first 9 missions I flew came back with a bunch of holes in it. Well, I enjoyed flying those airplanes. I did. You didn't feel that you were on the line anywhere to be shot at. That was one thing. And I always had the feeling that, see, one thing I always did, at the end of the runway before I'd punch the throttles open, I'd say the Lord's Prayer. Shove the throttles and go. Well, see, in Europe, they needed the fighter planes to help defend the bombers. But over there, you didn't run into that many Zeros anymore. The Zeros were pretty well. Japan couldn't build them fast enough. We were flying out of Clark Field, and we were supposed to go to Formosa that day. And of all the things that happened, we had checked everything out, had run it through the pre-flight checks, everything, started down the runway, got past the tower, and they called us on the radio and said, there's pieces falling off of your plane. And they said, abort your flight. Well, we're 2/3 of the way down the runway. There's not stopping room left. And I said, we can't get this thing stopped by the time we get to the end of the runway, and there's a big ditch down there at the end of it. We better take it off then and circle around and go down south here and to that dry river bed and dump your bombs in the river and that sand. Well, we went down there and we jettisoned that load of bombs and they all went off. We were at about 1,500 feet when we dropped them. We gained 500 feet altitude when that bombs went off. And then we come in and landed, and what had happened, the starting motor that starts the engine, you know, it had caught fire, and it had burnt most of the housing out of the bottom of the engine. Well, oil is pumped from a 40-gallon barrel up here to each engine. It's pumped in, and then there's a sump pump that pumps it back. Well, the sump pump was gone. So our oil is going through the engine and flying out in the air. We were stationed up in Clark Field. We went down to WWII, I think, to pick up a plane. On the way back, they said to fly down there and then fly back, so I just sent a radio message back, and I said, well, we've got some terrific weather going on here. Can we lay over the night and take off early in the morning? Yeah. Well, that was a mistake. Because in the morning, it was clear at WWII. But on our way back up the Philippines, we ran into one heck of a front. It was from the water up to about 50,000 feet to this front, and there was a hole in it, and we said, oh, we'll fly in that hole. We flew in there, and it was probably about halfway through it, and all of a sudden, it's all closed in. We did a complete 360, and there wasn't any outlets. We could see the water down below and the sky above. I said to the navigator, give me a heading to get to the Philippines. Well, he gave me a heading, and we took off that direction and flew on the instruments, and it got pretty rough because there was a couple times there we had full power on and we're losing 500 feet a minute. We was in a downdraft. Got down to about 1,500 feet altitude, and I thought, well, we got to get out of this thing or we're going in the water. About that time, we hit an updraft. We went back up to about 12,000 feet again. And then we got out of the storm, and I said to the navigator, I said, where are we at? He said, just a minute. He says, I got to take a couple shootings on the sun and stuff. I said, I don't recognize that coast of that island ahead of us. He says, I don't recognize it either. We got to go up over the top through one of them valleys and between them mountain peaks. We were on the right island, but we had never seen that coastline before. We managed to get through that one valley and get back out of there, and from then on, we had good going, made it back to the field. That trip to Japan, when we went up there looking for people or Japs to attack us or something, they told us we could go over to Nagasaki, we could circle it, do not open the windows on the plane. Well, we circled it, and you couldn't believe, it was just nothing. Clear out on the edges of town, there were some buildings still, walls and stuff standing, stone walls. But the rest of it was just like, like this floor, I guess. And it was black from the heat, burn. Well, I would have had quite a military career if I'd have stayed in. Well, my wife and I settled in Monticello in an apartment up above a plumbing shop. And we lived there a couple of years, and then I decided we're going to build a house because we had some money we'd saved. So we built our first house, and then we built a second one, then a third one. And then we bought an acreage down by Scotch Grove. I did carpenter work, I did painting. I had a spray painting outfit running to spray. Well, during the war, these farmers didn't get their buildings painted, so there was a lot of work to be done. None of my crew got injured, not a one of them. There's 10 men on the crew and nobody got injured, so I thought we did all right.